Hi, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about how to find your style. This is something that I get a question about real frequently from students both in private workshops and private students and in classes. Um, People really worry about how to develop their own singular style. So what we're going to cover today are three main things. First, what is style? What do we mean by that? Second, why would you even want to have one? Third, four ways that I would suggest to work on developing a style of your own. First, feeding your imagination. Second, knowing yourself. Third, developing a daily practice of some sort. And fourth, establish some accountability. So let's dive in and talk about all of those. I wanted to start with a quote. By now, y'all have realized I love quotes. I think they sort of get you into the right frame of mind. This one's from Sonia Donnelly. She says, after years of painting, drawing, sculpting, or whatever, your style becomes you. You are your style. Inseparable, one and the same, no matter what you choose to create. And I think that's an important thing to think about for a little bit, what she means by that. Your style and you are the same thing. So your style is like your handwriting. It's something that develops over time and it becomes inseparable from who and what you are. So it becomes something you don't have to think about. It is the characteristic way that you do things. All of us have a style in the way that we dress. We have certain choices we make about clothing, fabric, about the kind of food that we eat, about where we live and how we live. The same thing applies to painting. Don't overthink it. It will happen almost all of its own accord, but there are definitely ways that you can speed up that process. So first of all, let's look at what style actually is. Like I said, it's your handwriting, your characteristic way of doing something. Style in painting comes from how you use the language of painting. It's a combination of what you paint and how you paint. So it's a combination of subject matter, composition, techniques, and materials. It's no one single thing. It's a combination of all of the above. So it's subject matter, composition, techniques, and materials, and the way that you approach dealing with those things. That's what I mean by the language of painting. Why would you want to have one? That's also a question that I think has two sides to it. We're going to talk about the positives first. For one thing, it allows you to learn more faster and you go deeper rather than broader. So focusing in on one idea, one style, one subject matter will allow you to become a better painter actually much more rapidly than if you try to stay a generalist and focus on variety. So again, like I said in the last module about letting some things go, remember that letting things go doesn't mean you're leaving them behind forever. You can come back to them later. But it is very, very important to learn the discipline of focus. So you'll learn more about painting faster by going deeper rather than broader in your explorations. The second thing that I think is a really important reason for wanting to have a distinct style is it makes your work recognizable. That sort of leads into that third thing, but it is still a little separate. You want people to be able to look at your work and go, that's a Jane Smith, or that's a Beth Jones. You want it to be recognizable as yours. It won't be immediately if you haven't been working in a distinct style for very long, or if you haven't really gotten one yet, but it'll happen. And being recognizable means that when people see your work in reproduction, on the internet, in galleries, or other venues, they're going to recognize it and identify it with you. Third thing comes out of that second one. It makes your work collectible. And deep down underneath, all of us want to have that sort of dialogue that develops between the collector and the artist, that we want to exchange our work and our experience with people who appreciate that work and experience. So having a distinctive style makes your work collectible and reassures both galleries and collectors that your work is worth their time and their investment. Brock had a really, I think, astute way of looking at the flip side, the negative side of style, because I want to quantify or qualify my suggestions about style just a little bit. In his quote, this quote, he says, one has to guard against a formula that's good for everything, that can interpret reality in addition to the other arts, and that rather than creating, can only result in a style or stylization. This is the downside to style. So you need to watch that you're not creating a formula or becoming a formulaic painter. And by that, I mean that you're tying yourself in so tightly to one single way of doing things that you become almost a parody of yourself. I don't think this is something to be too concerned about at this point. It's something that tends to happen and become an issue with artists mid-career, late career. But it is something to guard against. Every now and then, periodically, you have to do something to break out of the kind of formulaic way that you are working. So it might be playing with a different media, it might be exploring a completely different subject, but you have to break the patterns that you set as well as setting the patterns. So keep that in mind as you're working. Then we're going to get to what I really think is the meat and potatoes of what we're covering today. I think it's the stuff that is the hardest to understand and actually really fairly easy to put into practice. So there are four main ways that we're going to talk about today to develop a style. The first, I think, is super, super important. It's feed your imagination and your creativity. Second, know yourself. What was it? The very famous saying, to thine own self be true. You need to know yourself. You need to know what you like, who you are. Third, develop a daily practice. That's important for everything that you do. Fourth, equally important, establish accountability. So let's go through each of these things one at a time and talk about what I mean by that. First, we're going to talk about feeding your imagination and creativity. If you think about making art as being a process that's very much like living and breathing, you have to put stuff in order to get stuff out. So if you are not feeding your imagination or doing anything reflectively, then you're not going to have anything to talk about. You're not going to have a feeling or a passion about the subject matter that you're working with. So it's extremely important to feed your imagination, feed your creativity. I would even suggest making at least once a week dates to do one of the things that I'm going to suggest that you do to feed that imagination. First thing is read. I think it's super important to read. You need to read about other artists. You need to read about ideas that interest you. They don't even necessarily have to have anything to do with art directly. One of the things that I'm very, very interested in case you haven't guessed already, is the environment. So I read a good deal about geography, sense of place, environmental issues, as well as information about landscape painting, previous artists who worked with landscape. So reading is one of the quickest ways to really, really fire up your imagination. So think about putting some things into your imagination stew pot that are going to come from books or magazines, not just on the internet. Don't forget about real old-fashioned books and magazines. There's something to be said for holding something in your hand and looking at a larger reproduction. Although there's also great material out there on the internet to read as well. Second thing, I cannot stress how important this is. It is super important. And I know for some of you who are in rural areas, it's harder to do this, so you may not be able to do it more than once a month or several times a year, but it is super important to do. You need to look at good art in person. Notice I said good art, which means don't just look at stuff that's at some outdoor art fair. There's great stuff in those, but there's also a lot of schlock or junk. You need to feed yourself on good art. There's several ways to do that. The first is really more accessible when you're closer to an urban area, but there are some rural venues as well. Visit art museums and galleries, nonprofits as well as for-profits. Go in, take a look at the real paintings, not the things that you're seeing in magazines, books, and online. Art in person looks different. I'm convinced that one of the reasons I see so many thin paintings right now being produced is that so many people experience art at second hand rather than in person. So if you're looking at a reproduction, for example, in a book or on the internet, you're not seeing the physical texture, the physicality of the painting. You need to see it in person to see that. When you see good art in person, you'll see just how painterly good painting really is. So take some time, go to an art museum, go to a gallery. The other thing you can do to look at good art in person is visit other artists' studios. Lots of areas have open studios. The next time one comes up in your area, grab some hours and take a look. Go through what other people are doing in their studios. You'll get some idea for setting up your own, as well as really beginning to feed some physical painting into your imagination creativity machine. Third way to feed your imagination is to talk to other artists. Again, a good thing to do if you're visiting other artists' studios. But you can't always necessarily do that in person, so join an artist group on Facebook. Stay active in the Facebook group that we've got, but talk to other artists. It doesn't always have to be about art. Talking about art is one thing, but you can also talk about life. See if you can find a group of artists who are dealing with subject matter that you really find interesting, or are interested in similar activities. For example, I'm a passionate horseback rider, and I have other artist friends who are also into horses and may or may not actually paint horses. I don't right now. But we talk about how that feeds into our creative process, and it really does. So those kind of connections are super important. Talk to other artists also just about what interests you. All of those kinds of connections lead to very, very rich dialogues that can feed what you're going to do as an artist. Fourth thing I would suggest, listen to podcasts about art. There are a number of really, really good ones out there. Antrese Wood has one called The Savvy Painter. Then there's Leslie Sada's podcast on artists helping artists, all of which have valuable information like interviews with other artists, techniques and tips, as well as things on the business of art. So listen to podcasts about art, and it will help feed into that creative process. Last but not least, watch art and artist videos. This is where the internet really, really comes in handy. Head over to Netflix or Amazon Prime. Look up some of the longer art videos that are out there that can give you background on artists' lives and on their process. Even the ones that are fictional still can fire up your imagination. Girl with Pearl Earring still is one of the most beautiful films I've seen. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It'll make you want to go paint. There are also lots and lots of artist videos, and I don't just mean demos and how-tos, but people talking about the ideas behind their work, about the processes that they work through, about their interaction with their subject matter. And I'll put some links to some of those into the resources down at the bottom of the page or into the text on the page. But there are many out there. Head over to YouTube, see what you can find. If you have a favorite artist, I know I've suggested several to y'all over the course of the course, but if you have a favorite artist, look them up on YouTube. See if they've given a gallery talk and see if you can hear them talk about their work in person. Makes a huge, big difference. My next suggestion is to know yourself. And I think that is extremely important because a good chunk of developing a style is figuring out what matters to you, what you're passionate about, what you respond to. So take some time for reflection. Robert Ginn said, style essentially appeared out of what I liked to do. If you don't reflect, you're not going to know what you liked to do. And if you're not familiar with Robert Ginn, he was a fabulous Canadian artist who gave the great gift of the painter's keys to artists for I don't know how many years. They're still available online, although Robert passed away about a year and a half ago. A very, very giving artist. But I agree with what he said. Style essentially appears out of what it is that you really feel passionate about, what you like to do. So take some time to reflect on what the things are that you like to do. Don't forget that. I think that sketchbook that I keep harping on is as important for reflecting and journaling as it is for making drawings and sketches. So think about putting some words into your sketchbook as well as some images. Reflect. Second thing, journal about your ideas. Write down stuff. Make no judgments. Just journal. Write about the things that you've done to feed your imagination and creativity. So if you've done any of the things from number 1, write about them in your sketchbook. How did you respond to them? What did you like? What did you not like? What just got you fired up? Third thing, and I am a huge, huge believer in this, I've written about it a lot on my blog, is developing a daily practice. I can't emphasize how important that is. You are better off giving yourself 30 minutes a day to do something towards your art practice every day than you are taking 4 hours on Saturday. So I know most of us have 9-to-5 jobs, other things that call and pull away on our time. But give yourself at least 30 minutes a day to do something. And it can be a whole variety of things. It can be journaling, sketchbooking, or painting. Here's another quote from Cennino Cennini. Cennini was a Renaissance Baroque painter, Italian Baroque painter. And he said, then you will find, if nature's granted you any imagination at all, that you'll eventually acquire a style individual to yourself. It cannot help being good because your hand and your mind, being always accustomed to gather flowers, would not know how to pluck thorns. What he means is if you do it all the time, you're going to develop good practices. So think about developing some sort of daily practice. It could be journaling every morning with a cup of coffee. Give yourself 30 minutes to write down ideas. It could be drawing in your sketchbook every day for 30 minutes. Make some notans. Try to capture a notan and thumbnail every single solitary day. The more you do those, the faster you're going to get. You'll get the absolute most benefit by painting every day. Doesn't have to be a good painting, but paint every day. One of my mentors in grad school is a very, very successful painter. He's shown in New York, Chicago, LA, all across the country in major galleries. Gave me information when I was in grad school that I have held on to for the last 30 years. He said, if you make 100 paintings, you can throw 50 of them away because they're bad paintings and still have 50 good paintings. But if you only make 15 paintings in a year, then every last one of those paintings has to be good and it'll hang you up. So you are better off working consistently and making stuff that is half garbage then you are making every single painting that you do precious. So try to figure out how to work some kind of painting into your daily routine. It could be working in your sketchbook with a brush. It could be doing some of those 10-minute paintings that we did in the last module. I think those are great ways to begin to work painting into your daily practice. Give yourself 10-minute paintings to do a day. You will see a dramatic improvement in your painting. You'll also see some distinct styles beginning to occur. The fourth thing that I'm suggesting is as important as all the rest. It's to establish accountability. And the way to establish accountability, and by that I mean having somebody check in on whether you're really doing what you're setting out to do. There are all kinds of ways to get that accountability, but it all starts with first making some goals. So set some goals. Think about what it is that you want to accomplish. It could be goals for the month, goals for the quarter, goals for the year. I would suggest not making them super long-term because you're going to get lost along the way. I would make monthly goals, but make a goal or two. Don't make too many. We all get trumped up or caught up in making too many goals and then not being able to get them all done. You never have as much time as you think you do. So make 1 or 2 goals for the month or the week. Go with those. Then, this is the important part. This is where the accountability comes in. Share those goals with someone you trust who'll hold you accountable. Who'll ask you periodically, how's it going on that working with warm and cool color contrasts? Let me see what you've been working on. It needs to be someone you trust, though. Don't just pull anybody's name out of the hat. What you really want is somebody who is going to check in with you, not necessarily make lots of value judgments. Also somebody who is not going to tell you you can't do it. You don't want a dream squasher. So be very careful with who you pick to be an accountability partner. But share your goals with someone you trust. I think that is almost as important as anything else on here, is that one element of accountability. So what we've covered today are these 3 things. First, what style is. Second, why you want one. And 4 ways to develop a style. Feeding your imagination, knowing yourself, developing a daily practice, and establishing accountability. One of the things I want you to do, actually I want you to do 2 things. I want you to pick one thing from that list of ways to feed your imagination, do it, and then share what you did in the Facebook group. 2, I want you to set one painting goal and share it with someone you trust. Someone who sort of knows something about art. I think that's an important part of it. But I want you to do those 2 things. Share in the Facebook group what you did to feed your imagination, and share in the Facebook group that you have set the goal. You don't have to share that goal in the group, but I just want to know that you made a goal and that you've shared it with someone for accountability. I hope this has been helpful. And let me know if you have any questions at all about ways to develop a style. I'm looking forward to seeing what y'all do with this lesson. Take care and happy painting.